Good morning, everyone, and we wrap up our coverage of the Grandview Hotel disaster, which occurred 50 years ago this morning in downtown Ripon, by talking to three lovely ladies, including one who was there the night of the fire. All three of them were employed at the Grandview Hotel, not all at the time of the fire, but we're going to ask them to give us an idea of the hotel and its elegance, the people who lived there, and hopefully help you understand how important the hotel was to Ripon and the community at this time. We begin with a woman who was there the night of the fire. Not at the time it broke out, but was working there that night. And Adelaide Poblitz joins us this morning. And for our listeners, why don't you give us an idea? Just go back to that night, February 1st, 1949, and just give our listeners some idea of what you did that night. You were working there that evening.
Yes, I was a waitress for the Rotary and Kiwanis clubs meeting or whatever they had there, and I worked until 9 o'clock, and then I had to go down and bowl.
You weren't there when the fire happened. When did you find out?
The next morning at the breakfast table, my husband and I sat and listened to the Milwaukee radio station. This radio station wasn't here then yet, and heard about the big fire in Ripon, Wisconsin, the Grandview Hotel. We both looked at one another. I guess this was like 6 o'clock in the morning because I had to take him down to his job, and I don't know, remember if we left our breakfast or what, but we dashed down in a hurry, I tell you. There everything was, oh dear.
When you go back to the morning that you went down there and you saw the fire, saw what was left of the hotel, what was just if you can remember the emotions you felt driving towards what used to be your pace. I mean, you're also unemployed, obviously. You're out of a job now, but what emotions did you feel as you drove towards that, what was just a smoldering hole in the ground?
Well, it was the, I don't know what, namesake of Ripon. I mean, it was just a shame, a very shame that elegant building had to be down.
When you found it was out, it was a fire, were you surprised when it was a fire? I've heard people say not if it's going to burn, but when it's going to burn, that it was such an old building. Were you surprised that it burned down?
Well, no, not really, I guess. The brick outside and wood inside, I suppose that those years, that's many years ago, and it probably was easier than we would think nowadays.
What was your job? What did you have to do?
Waitress work.
Now that sounds, was it easy? Was it hard? Was it a glamorous job? Did you make a lot of money?
Do you want to know how much?
That's what I want to know.
$7 a week, but we made tips. And of course I was so young and agile and carrying those big trays, I didn't mind it. I just loved every bit of it. It was my job.
Now we've heard the stories. Now you were a young lady at that time, a lovely young lady and a waitress, and was that the happening spot in town? I mean, the boyfriends came to pick you up, and was that the hot spot in town?
Oh, yes. Oh.
Now, did I embarrass you with that one?
No, not really.
The truth is not embarrassing. Adeline McCullagh was also a waitress there at the Grandview Hotel. How long did you work there, roughly?
Oh, gosh, I just can't remember how many years I worked there, but I worked there a lot of years. And I first worked in the kitchen, and then I decided that I wanted to be a waitress, so they got me to be a waitress girl.
Tell us about the food at the Grandview. I've heard everything from it was the best in the area to it was, if you wanted to impress somebody, you took them to the Grandview for lunch or dinner.
Oh, I thought it was good. I thought they had good food there, and everybody else thought so too. Even the customers or the guests, they thought it was very good food.
The night of the fire, give our listeners, where were you the night of the fire?
I was home. Living on Griswold Street, and in the morning, I think my mother called me and told me the hotel burnt. The Grand Hotel burned.
When did you find out? Did you know right away that the 6 people had died in there?
No, I didn't know nothing about anything then yet, because I I can't remember if I had to go to work or, I just can't remember where I worked after that.
We will come back and talk to all of our guests because we're also going to ask them to tell us more about the owners of the hotel. The Coons bought the hotel in 1935. Mr. Coon passed away the year before, but Mrs. Coon and her son were there at the time of the fire. And we're going to ask all of them to give us a little idea. Marnie Prellwitz was there in the early 1940s, worked there, 1939, right up to around 1941. And take us into the hotel. Describe the lobby for us, Marnie.
Well, the lobby was a nice place, and you come directly into it. And but it was just a desk. There wasn't too much in it at all. But I used to work at the desk for the last year from 7 to 9 always, because the Coons didn't like to get up in the morning, and she always had asked me to come and do that. But I was a waitress, and I cooked one day a week, always on Fridays. And Monday nights I worked in the cocktail lounge. So I knew my way around.
Do you remember how much it was for a room for a night? Do you remember that far back? How much it would cost if I wanted a room?
I think around $3.
Your memory is incredible. I can't even remember what I paid for a gallon of milk yesterday, but you can remember the price of that. Go ahead.
And I figured it was around $3 because I know I had to give change.
I go upstairs. Now let's walk into the hotel. I walk in. I look to my left. There's the dining room. I go forward. There's the counter where I would have found you, say, in the morning in 1940, ready to give me change for a $5. Yeah. I go to the right. And there's the bar. Behind that's the cocktail lounge. I go up to my room. For our listeners, there's some pictures, I understand, of the lobby still out there. But I have not found any pictures of the rooms. Can you describe what a typical room... I know you lived there for a while. You weren't there at the time of the fire, but what a typical room looked like?
I can't remember just too much. They had a bathroom, not in every room, though. And the rooms were a good size. I mean, they weren't small rooms.
Where were you on the night of the fire on February 1st, 1949?
I was living out north of Ripon on a farm 6 miles north. But one of the kids woke up. It must have been between 2 and 3, and I was up, and our bay window was to the south, and I could see there was an awful fire in Ripon. The sky was red, and you could almost see flames. But I had no idea what it was.
You went back to bed. You woke up the next morning and found out. What was your reaction when you found out? And how did you find out it was the Grandview?
I was like Adelaide on the radio eating breakfast. When I heard it, I started to cry because that was my home, and I liked it there. I mean, and the one reason that I left was when I was going steady, and the fireman told us that there was no ladder that would reach up to our rooms where we were. My boyfriend said, "You're going to get out of there."
So you are one of the people who will, that place, I don't want to use the word death trap, but if a fire broke out, you realized that, and your room was on the 3rd floor, right?
Mm-hmm. In the northwest corner, and that if a fire broke out, that would have been it, because we wouldn't have any chance.
Do you remember ever seeing fire extinguishers? Were there any fire escapes in that hotel?
Not that I can recall.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to swing back over here, and I'm going to ask Adeline, because I know I saw you nodding your head in agreement back when you were working there. Do you remember any fire extinguishers, any fire ladders? Were the waitresses ever trained on what to do if there was a fire?
Never any way of training anybody there. I mean, I can't even say we've seen a fire extinguisher.
Was there ever any other fires whenever any of you ladies worked there? Were there ever any fires, kitchen fires, nothing?
Nothing that I know of. Nothing that I know of.
Going back to the night of the fire, go back to Addie Poblitz, and since you were the last one there, we heard Marnie talk about the fire inspection, saying, and I've found records of a fire inspection a couple years prior saying that the building was not ready to handle a fire. You didn't see fire extinguishers. You didn't see a fire escape. So essentially, people who lived on the 3rd and 4th floors in this fire, if they didn't crawl out, they weren't going to jump out.
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Did you think the building was a death trap?
Well, I was too young to even think about things like that at the time, never thinking of a fire.
It never crossed your mind that there would ever be a fire and what would happen?
Not at that age.
Let's go back to Adeline, because you want to comment on that question.
The fire escape in the back. In the back, because it was in the kitchen. That's where the garbage man would come up and down, but I don't know if it went way up or not. But I know they had a black wrought iron fire steps going up and down, but I don't know how far it went up this the place or not. I don't know that.
Marnie, do you remember that? Do you remember that?
It was from the kitchen, because like the basement was like on the side hill, and the kitchen was above that, and that fire escape went from the kitchen down, but I don't remember it going any higher.
The owners, Mrs. Kuhn, she was there. Her son, of course, Mr. Kuhn had passed away a year earlier. They survived the fire. I want to get your impression, so people down the road, when they hear this, know more about the people that own the hotel, the people you work for. I'll start with Addie, because you're going to defer to Marnie. Well, who wants to? I'll give the question. Whoever wants to answer it. What was working for Mrs. Kuhn like? Who wants to answer that one? Well, I see 2 volunteers. We'll start with Adeline. What was it like?
I enjoyed working there. I enjoyed it. I mean, she never really, hollered at me or anything that I know of, and neither did Mr. Kuhn. I can't remember ever saying, anything. I know I was going to quit once and go to another place to work, and because I thought I was going to get more money. I did. I was promised to get more money, but she said, well, I'll give you the same price what they're going to give you, so stay here. So I did.
You, before we went on the air, you talked about a Christmas gift that they gave you. Why don't you tell our listeners what they gave you?
Well, they, I don't know how many girls got it, but I know Millie Radine got one, and I imagine Harley Warner got one, but I did. And we got silver, creamer, and sugar bowl with a little tray. And I still got it.
I didn't know you still had it. That's a memento from the hotel.
Yeah.
Marnie, why don't you tell us what it was like working for the Kuhns? You worked for both Mr. and Mrs. Kuhn.
Yes, I enjoyed working for her. She was very nice, but I didn't get along maybe the best with him, because I got off on the wrong foot. When I started cooking in the kitchen, we always had pot roast on Friday and potato pancakes. And I didn't know how to make potato pancakes. And I told them I didn't, but Mrs. Kuhn said she'd give me a recipe, mix it up, but I ground the potatoes instead of grating them. And when Mr. Kuhn came out, I got a lecture. But Mrs. Kuhn came out and smoothed it all over, because she was that way. If he ever was angry at any of the girls, she always smoothed it over. And she was a very nice person.
The guests who lost their lives there night, of course, the 3 men who were there that night, the 3 power and light employees, Mr. Wasserbach, Mr. Wingler, and Mr. Black, were working on a high-power line from Ripon to Amro, and were staying there that night. So they weren't permanent guests, but 3 of the other 6 victims, of course, Alice Callan and Clara Salverson and Charlie Wentland, they lived there. The Grandview was their home. Essentially, their home burned, and they died in there. Addie, you knew. Let's start with Alice Callan. Let our listeners know, what was Alice Callan like?
Well, she was the school teacher, and very prim and proper, and very nice elderly lady.
Charlie Wentland, 72 years old, a retired farmer. I'm sure you knew him too.
Oh, yes, They were steady roomers.
And Miss Salverson, 60-year-old bookkeeper for the Knitting Works. Of course, the Knitting Works no longer exists, just like the hotel. What do you remember about Clara?
Well, she was a very nice lady also. Much as I knew of her, it was very nice to wait on. And
the typical night at the hotel, what time did the bar normally close?
well, I imagine those years it was 1 o'clock.
Because for our records, the fire broke out. Do all of you agree that the bar closed about 1 o'clock? I see you all nodding your head. Okay, so about 40 minutes after that is when the fire broke out. That will be an important factor when we come back for our final question that we're going to ask. Which of the guests did you know, Adeline?
Well, I didn't know really any of the guests there because, I mean, one of the guests was just like the other, you know.
Did you know any of the residents?
Yeah, I know Charlie, and I know Mrs. Salverson, and Mrs. Callan, and I don't know, there's a lot of them there that I don't know if they were gone or what happened to them, but I know Bill Diedrich was there, and Pete Ramsey, and I can't think of a lot of other. Well, John, too, the porter, I don't know what happened to him, if he was there or what happened to him.
One of the questions I've asked, and I asked Myrtle McGonigal earlier, is if she saw anybody go back in. Now, this is a third-person account, but maybe someday somebody will want to know this for historical purposes. You heard that Alice Callan and Miss Salverson, whose rooms were near, and if you look at a picture, and I'm pointing to one here today, the balconies out in the front, you heard that they came out and they went back in. What story did you hear?
I heard that they went back in, because she, Miss Callan, she was very shy, and she was either out in a nightie or bathrobe, and she just didn't want to, be in public that way. And then Miss Salverson, she had to go back and get her fur coat. That's all I heard.
And of course, they never came back out from that fire. Marnie, were Mr. Wentland or Miss Salverson or Miss Callan, were any of them living there at the time that you worked there?
No, Miss Salverson was, and then there was a lady, a Mrs. Hall, that they were very good friends. And I still have the nightgown they gave me for Christmas when I was there.
You have another souvenir of the residence. The final question I'm going to ask is going to be probably the toughest one for all three of our ladies, because they worked there and lived there and laughed there and loved there and waited for their boyfriends there. This was their lifetime. That fire was 50 years ago, ladies, and I know this is a hard question, and you can base your answer on rumors or what you knew. This is your answer for history. This is what they're going to hear 50, 100, 150 years from now. Was that fire an arson? In your mind, did somebody light that fire and kill those 6 people? We'll begin with Addie. You were there that night.
I never thought anything about it until I heard rumors and gossip, and thinking it was just gossip.
Did you ever have somebody in your mind that you thought may have done it? Did you ever, when you heard it was an arson, you went, well, it was probably so-and-so. If you don't want to give the name, that's fine. But did you have somebody you thought would have possibly had a reason to do that?
Just in the rumors, when they mentioned a name, I didn't know whether to think he did it or not.
I'm going to go to Adeline. I'm going to ask you the very same question. Do you think that those 6 people were murdered in an arson fire?
Yes, I do really think so. I really do think. I think somebody set that fire.
In your mind, do you have any idea? Do you have any reason to believe who would have done it?
I do, but I'm not saying.
You're going to take that one with you for the rest of your life?
I'm not saying that because I just don't want to stick my neck out too far. But I just feel that I've always thought that. I don't know, because there's people, disgruntled ones working, and I think that he just took revenge on it, and he just thought the heck with it. I'll do that.
And I will not mention the name there. We'll let the people 50 years from now, they can do the legwork and figure out who you're referring to. But if anybody wants to know, they can easily look it up. Marnie, in your mind, now you weren't there the night of the fire, but you obviously were in the community. You had a family. What did you hear?
Well, I heard it was arson, but I didn't really believe it at first. But later on, then I got to thinking it had to be arson, because to go through as fast as it did, and I really didn't give it a thought who it could be at first, but later on I had my own opinion. But it was a very sad thing, because I know we went down the next afternoon right away to see it, and it was still smoldering, and the people were still in there. I didn't even want to look at it.
Actually, I'm going to give you one final question, since I don't want to end on a sad note about arson and murder. I'm going to end on a happy note. I want you to think back when you worked there. Your favorite story, your favorite person, your favorite experience, your favorite part of the job, anything you want to anything that you want to. What's the happiest thing you remember about the hotel, Adeline?
Well, I don't know. It just seemed like a nice place to work for, and I like the people that were there to, waitresses and all. I don't know. I enjoy it.
Marnie, I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite memory or favorite person, favorite coworker, favorite part of the job? What do you remember?
Well, I'll start with one of my favorite things that happened was we had a Wisconsin Power and Light banquet there one night, and after it was over, the guys passed a dish for tips for the girls, and we had to all come out from the kitchen. Well, when they passed the tip, there was an older guy there, Mr. Husky, and he put in an old silver dollar. And the guy said, you can't get away with that. You've got to pick out which girl you want to give it to. And I smiled nice, and I got it. And I still have that, too. But that was one of my big events, because I didn't take any of the tip for the rest of the girls had the tip. I figured I got my dollar. But I enjoyed working there. I enjoyed working with the girls. They were always nice to me, and I did like Mrs. Kuhn very much.
We'll save the final statement for the young'un in the crowd. A young lady. I've seen pictures of Addie when she was there. Lovely lady with a smile. What's your favorite memory of the hotel and working there?
Just give me a minute. Well, at that time it was a job, and it was better paying than doing housework for somebody. Mrs. Kuhn was marvelous. I remember one time she and her husband, Henry Kuhn, were having a dispute, and she wanted to go to Milwaukee and spend some money. So she asked if I'd drive their big, beautiful Buick down there. Oh, I was just flabbergasted. I thought, young punk like me driving down to Milwaukee? And I drove her down there, and of course I had lived there before too, so anyway, she was a lovely person, took us to a nice place to eat, elegant place to eat, and made it safe and sound.
That's a nice memory to have of the Grandview, and I think that's a great way for us to end this interview in our series of interviews. We want to thank Myrtle McGonigal, who was there the night of the fire, Frank Farver, who gave us some insight into the arson possibilities, Bob Lukusky, who was a young man of 15 at the time when he drove up Watson Street and saw the hotel gone, and our guests today that were with us taping these interviews as we put them together. And we hope you enjoyed this, because for many of our listeners that were old enough, it's hard to believe it was 50 years ago this morning, as we're here today, that where City Hall is now was just a smoldering wreck of a hotel with 6 bodies trapped inside that were eventually recovered. And to this day, the questions will always remain. Was it arson? Was it murder? Was it electrical? We'll never know the answers, because the people involved obviously took the answers to the grave. But it's been a pleasure working on this story. I want to thank all of our guests who took time out to come visit with us. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot. And I think if you have a chance to see any of these people, thank them for the time they've spent and for the memories they've shared. This has been a special presentation of the Grandview Hotel disaster on AM 1600 WRPN.